Hi there guys, I wanted to talk a little bit today about the crisis in special educational needs funding, and there's an article in The Guardian which looks at this and the government's current proposals on this. Before I get into that, I just wondered if you could do us a favour and hit the like and subscribe button. I want to reach my target of getting 1 subscriber by the end of June, so thanks guys. So let's get into it. So the article today says the councils face millions in extra send costs as overhaul delayed. High needs deficits kept off council books for 2 more years in England. So let's have a look. Cash-strapped councils in England will be hit with hundreds of millions of pounds in extra costs after the government delayed tackling the £5 billion deficit spent supporting children and young people with special educational needs and disabilities. Council leaders and experts said the 2-year delay prolongs the financial struggles faced by local authorities as they await the government's overhaul of SEND provision, and warned that it could force more councils into sell-offs and insolvency. So local authorities have been allowed to keep high needs deficits off their balance sheets thanks to a special statutory override, and this mechanism was due to end next April, creating a cliff edge that threatened to bankrupt scores of councils. But the override will now run until April 2028, the government has announced, as part of its wider reforms on local government funding in England. And then let's see what the impact of this is. So council high needs budgets have been under pressure from the sharp rise in children with special needs, with the number requiring extra resources detailed in EHCP plans rocketing in recent years. Nearly 1 in 5 school children in England now have recognised special educational needs, according to Department for Education figures, including nearly 500,000 children with EHCPs. The government said it will use the 2-year delay to reform how the SEND system works and is funded, and in that time ministers say they intend to deal with the high needs deficits despite only raising central funding for local government just over 1% a year on average until 28-29. So a government spokesperson said, "This government inherited a SEND system left on its knees, which is why we are looking at changes for our plan for change to improve support for children and stop parents having to fight for help while bringing about financial sustainability for councils." And then this is the crucial part. "We will set out our full plans for reform in the autumn, including our approach to supporting councils with their deficits to deliver excellence everywhere for every child." Okay, so what does that mean for children with special educational needs in Britain in 2025? So I wanted to break this down. So I think there's 2 issues here. Firstly, they're going to have to pay, so the government are going to have to pay the £5 billion deficit for the services that have already been provided by councils. And then secondly, they're going to have to make SEND funding sustainable so that further debts aren't racked up by councils in future. So the key question then is, how are they going to do that? And what does that mean for our politics and for children and families who need, special educational needs services? I think absent any creative solution or something like a windfall tax on large companies, the £5 billion deficit for services already provided is going to have to be paid for from general taxation. However, there's little growth on the horizon, according to the OBR predictions. Labour are constrained by their own fiscal rules, and then they've also got their commitment not to raise taxes on working people. So, no NI, no national insurance increases, no income tax increases. So I'm really struggling to see where they're going to find that £5 billion. And that worries me. As we've just seen with the PIP cuts, where this government deems costs to be unsustainable, they don't look at tough choices on tax. What they do is they default to cutting eligibility for the benefit and then making sure that fewer people can claim it. And in the case of SEND funding, what I predict is going to happen is that they're going to look to change the criteria for children getting an EHCP. So specifically, I suspect they're going to make the eligibility criteria tougher so that fewer children can get an EHCP plan and therefore can get support via special educational needs funding. And then in terms of the wider politics of it, that'll then allow them to go to the electorate in 2028 and say, look, we've made tough choices, we've reformed the SEND system, and now we're going to pay off this £5 billion debt with some money that we found down the back of the sofa, and then we can all move forward positively. And then also, in terms of the politics of it, we'll be a year out from the election at that point. And I think that'll form part of their strategy of saying, look, we've made tough choices. Now we're on track as a country again. Don't ruin it all by giving the keys to Nigel Farage and reform. Which, on the face of it, all sounds great as a strategy, except for the fact that the needs of children with special educational needs, they won't have gone away. It just means that fewer people are going to be getting the help they need, and then those who are getting the help will be getting less support. And that in turn will mean that more is going to be expected of mainstream schools who are going to continue to be starved of funds. So I think we're going to be in this weird paradox in a few years where Labour are going to be saying, look, everything's great, trust us for another 5 years, while ordinary people and families continue to struggle and are refused the help that they need. And I think that's where we have this total disconnect in this country between politics and then the lives of ordinary people. And I fear this is going to be another example of that. And so then finally, in terms of what we can each individually do to try and influence this situation, I think if you've got a child with special educational needs or a child who's on an EHCP plan, or if you're just a person who's worried about this and you've got a Labour MP, I'd strongly encourage you to reach out to them, raise the issue, highlight the needs of your child, and tell the government the level of support that they need. Because when the government publishes its plan later this year, I suspect we're going to need to have an organised fight back against whatever they propose, for the reasons I've just mentioned, because I think we're looking at cuts, essentially. And it's going to be really useful to have a pre-existing dialogue with your MP about this issue at that point. So yeah, thanks a lot, guys. See you next time.